May 7th, 2017, Carlisle, Ohio. 18-year-old varsity cheerleader Brooke Skylar Richardson gave birth at home and buried her newborn daughter in the backyard of her parents' house. 2 months later, she described what had happened to her doctor, who informed police. Richardson was ultimately charged with aggravated murder, child endangerment, involuntary manslaughter, and abuse of a corpse. Today, we look back into this case and deep dive into the investigation, the testimony, and the verdict. Ultimately, we ask the question, was justice served in this case? Today, we find out together. This is BETHEA'S BYTE Reloaded Throwback, Ohio versus Richardson. And it begins right now. And a good Wednesday afternoon for everybody on the East Coast, a good late Wednesday morning for everybody here on the West Coast. Welcome to the 9th installment of Ohio versus Richardson and BETHEA'S BYTE Reloaded Throwback. I'm Ernest Bethea, the last outlaw. So good to have you all here. Sweetheart, I don't need that.
Oh, okay.
That's my better half trying to set me up with a ring light, which I don't need now. Anyway, we are closer and closer to closing arguments and a verdict in this case. But the defense still has to present their side of the argument. So we're going to continue with the testimony, starting with Alan Hirsch. We'll hear from him, Leanna Lyons, Chris Curry, Ashley Brown, and Dr. Stuart Bassman today. We'll have a great deal of testimony come tomorrow, including that of Brooke Skylar Richardson's brother, Jackson Richardson, and we'll also have a forensic pathologist to testify as well, and that'll be before we even think about touching closing arguments. So, as we prepare, let me go ahead and do the house cleaning. First off, as always, I thank you all for joining me. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, and share this video to your social media. Be sure to smash that like button. It helps out the channel greatly. If you want to join me for the live panel, the panel is always open. Click on the link, copy the link, paste that link into a browser tab or window. More than happy to have you in the discussion. If you're in the chat, all the comments we make, all the statements, our views, it's all speculation, deduction theory, opinion, that's not considered as evidence or fact. Your opinions are welcome. That's why I do this. It's not just about me. It's you guys too. Your opinions are welcome. Attacks against others, not so much. And I won't allow it. So if there's somebody's opinion you're not feeling at all you gotta do is go to the right hand side. You'll see 3 dots. Click on it. Click block, and boom, you won't ever have to hear that person throughout the duration. I bleed respect. So anything racist, homophobic, any attacks on what they look like, weight, etc., I don't want to hear it. I don't want any part of it. I'll block you first. All right, here's our short form version of a copyright disclaimer, just for the sake of this chat and for the software that I'm using. A trigger warning for everyone whose mental health I am trying to protect. If you cannot take a story like this, please do not put yourself in the midst of it. All the testimony you'll see throughout this is coming courtesy of my friends at Court TV, your front row seat to justice. All right, now that we've got all that out of the way, we are now going to hear from Alan Hirsch. Alan Hirsch is an interrogation expert. He's going to take the stand as far as what he believes as far as Brooke Richardson's interrogation and whether she was coaxed into saying something she really had no business saying. And so the testimony begins.
All right, we're now going to hear next witness is going to be Professor Hirsch. I think we've agreed in advance that Professor Hirsch's testimony is going to be somewhat narrow. Professor, I had you in the courtroom so that you would hear what the parameters of your testimony are going to be. That Professor Hirsch is not going to testify, nor is he going to be asked any questions as to whether or not the defendant's statement or any particular response to a question is the result of police coercion or improper questioning. He is not going to testify as to any opinion as to whether the defendant or any particular response is truthful or untruthful. That he is not going to testify as to whether or not the defendant is a suggestible individual or is one who is more susceptible to a particular interviewing technique. And he is not going to testify as to the number of false confessions or estimate as to the percentage of interrogations that result in either fake, false, or coerced confessions. I'm sorry, you can be seated. I thought I said that already. Right, Mr. Rickers?
Correct.
Right, Mr. Knippen, Ms. Kraft? I don't know who's speaking. Okay, you understand that, Professor?
Could I ask for clarification?
Sure.
Thank you. So I would testify if asked that this statement about her burning the baby was false, that we know it's false. I would not state that that was coerced or produced by any interrogation method, but I would say that we know it's false. That would not go outside your parameters.
That would not go outside my parameters.
That would be okay.
Yes.
And the second question is, I would not testify that she's a suggestible individual. Would I be permitted, if asked, to testify that I've read a report by a psychologist saying she is?
No.
Would not. Okay. Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Knippen, something on that?
My concern is when he says that he knows now that this statement to be false about whether the child was burned or not, I don't think is an accurate statement.
I think that he can say that he has viewed forensic evidence. So what's the question going to be, Mr. Rickers, with regard to this? What would the question be?
On the burning?
Yes.
God, it's deep in my outline. Apologize, Judge, I wasn't expecting to. Were there any comments that the officers made that you found especially problematic?
As long as he's focused on the questions by the officers, we're on good ground. If he is talking about the responses from Ms. Richardson, we are not on very good ground. Do we agree on that?
Yes, Judge, and my concern is he's making, and this is in his report as well, and I believe that this was probably information provided by defense counsel. He says, and correct me if I'm wrong, but he says, we have a statement that the police told her with respect to the burns that we know demonstrably now is false, that this child was not burned. And I agree that the evidence is such that there's no evidence of burning on the bones themselves, but that does not necessarily mean that the child was not burned.
Okay. I mean, I think the expert is not going to testify as to what that fact is or is not.
Okay. and that
But
was
he can
my-
be asked to assume a fact.
Sure.
Okay?
Okay.
Are we ready for the jury?
The burning was not true. Right?
He is allowed to assume, be asked a question to assume certain facts that may or may not be in dispute are true, and then give an opinion, not as to Ms. Richardson's response, but as to the questions, whether or not that affects his opinion.
Thank you.
Okay? Anything else? All right, go get the jury, and we're gonna break at 5:30 because the jury said we're leaving at 5:30. You may be seated. All right, he's right behind you.
Stand and raise your right hand. You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you will give in these proceedings to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
You may be seated.
Your Honor, could I request water? Oh, thank you very much.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Professor Hurst, could you please state your current position?
I teach law-related courses at Williams College. My title is instructor in the humanities, and I'm also chair of the Justice and Law Studies program at Williams College.
For how long have you taught at Williams?
I believe 13 years.
Can you describe for us your educational background?
I received my undergraduate degree from Amherst College in Massachusetts and my law degree from Yale Law School.
While at Yale, did you concentrate on any particular area of the law?
I took a particular interest in the overlap or intersection between law and psychology and studied extensively in that area.
Have you maintained your interest in the overlap of law and psychology
Yes, I have.
and continue to do work in that area?
Yes, I have.
You're not a psychologist.
That's correct.
Are there different kinds of confession experts?
Yes, there are two kinds. There is the mental health professional, typically a clinical psychologist or psychiatrist, who may evaluate a particular defendant to determine whether he or she is susceptible. And then there are experts like myself, typically legal scholars or social psychologists, whose principal expertise is in the interrogation methods that contribute to false confessions. And we have an expertise or an awareness of, knowledge of all aspects of the issue, but we are not mental health professionals and do not evaluate a particular person.
Would you please state some of the law-related work you've done that acquaints you with America's criminal justice system?
After law school, I spent 1 year as a law clerk for a judge on the United States Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit. I then spent 3 years as an attorney/writer at a government agency in Washington called the Federal Judicial Center. Ever since then, most of my law-related work has been teaching and writing about the law and serving as a trial consultant.
Is there a subject you focused on?
In the last 15 years or so, my focus has been on criminal interrogations and confessions.
Have you written on that subject?
Yes, I've written extensively both in legal academic journals as well as mainstream publications such as the Los Angeles Times.
What are the journals that published your scholarly articles on this subject?
Ohio State's Journal of Criminal Law, Berkeley Law School's Journal of Criminal Law, North Dakota's Journal of Law Journal, and Howard's Law Journal.
Have you done anything else related to interrogations and confessions, Professor?
Yes, I started and continued to operate the first website devoted to this subject.
What's the name of your website?
Truth About False Confessions.
And what's on that website?
So there's a lot of material. Some of it is permanent, like frequently asked questions and recommended literature. And then I also post comments or analyses from time to time.
What do you comment on or analyze?
Anything related to the subject. Could be new cases, new articles, new thoughts I've had, new cases I've been involved in, anything that strikes me as relevant.
How many posts have you done?
Certainly many hundreds.
Has your website received any official recognition?
Yes, in 2007, the American Bar Association listed it as in their top 100 law-related websites and listed it first among criminal law-related websites.
You mentioned that you do work as an expert consultant and witness, correct?
That's correct.
How many cases have you been retained in as an expert consultant?
Almost 200.
Have you testified in any of those cases?
I've testified in 33 cases.
Have you ever testified in the state of Ohio?
Yes, I have. I testified at a trial in, I believe, Darke County in 2010.
You mentioned your own scholarship, but how about more broadly? Is there a lot written about false confessions?
There is a voluminous literature. There are analyses of proven false confessions, there are observational studies of interrogations, there are some laboratory experiments, and there's a vast literature I guess I would call miscellaneous, but we're talking about many books and countless articles.
How well acquainted are you of all that
I'm
information?
pretty well acquainted. You have to be in order to contribute to that literature, which I have done.
Does much of this literature on false confessions concern interrogation methods?
Yes, it does. Sorry.
Interrogation methods used by law enforcement.
Yes, it does.
And are those organizations that train people in interrogations and let me strike that. Are there organizations that train people in interrogation techniques and produce interrogation manuals that are relied upon by law enforcement?
Yes, there are.
Is there one organization that is particularly influential in that regard?
Yes, there is.
What is it?
Reed and Associates.
And what is the Reed manual called?
Criminal Interrogations and Confessions.
And have you read and studied that manual?
Indeed, I mentioned writing for the Ohio State Journal of Criminal Law. That was a thorough critique of the Reed manual.
Let's turn to the background information about false confessions. Are there different categories of false confessions?
Yes, we break it down into three categories. First, there is the voluntary false confession. This is someone who comes forward outside of an interrogative situation and claims to have committed a crime that it turns out he or she did not. Then there is what we call the coerced compliant false confession. This is someone who, under interrogation pressure, knows he or she is innocent, but concludes that they are best off. It's the only escape from a difficult situation if they confess. And then there is the coerced internalized false confession. These are cases where the suspect actually comes to believe that he or she committed the crime, even though it turns out they did not.
May we approach for 1 second, Judge? I just don't want to do something.
All right, Mr. Rickers, you may continue.
Professor Hirsch, are false confessions common? Professor Hirsch, how do we know that we have false confessions?
So a lot of that knowledge started when the Innocence Project began testing people for DNA, and hundreds of people were exonerated who had been convicted of crimes. And it turned out that a substantial number of them had confessed. And that led social scientists and legal scholars like myself to begin digging for false confessions. And quite a few proven false confessions have been identified. And we have reason to believe that that number is actually relatively, it's what we call a tip of an iceberg, that there's really.
Sustained. The jury will disregard that last portion of the answer with regard to how many false confessions might be around.
Doctor, when you mention a risky approach to interrogation, are you referring to the Reed method?
Yes.
Can you summarize for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what the Reed method is all about?
So technically there are 9 steps, but it really consists of 2 essential steps. First, the interrogator expresses absolute certainty of the suspect's guilt. They communicate to them, we know you're guilty, nothing you say will convince us otherwise, and they cut off any denials or protestations of innocence. Having scared the suspect like that, they then do various things which we call minimizing the crime. These are various ways of suggesting or even explicitly telling the defendant that if you confess, it won't be that bad. It may be that your role was secondary, or there were mitigating circumstances, or there are a great number of minimization techniques or themes. And it's that combination that breaks down people, innocent people included. Confrontation scares the defendant into thinking it's futile to maintain innocence, and minimization makes the defendant or suspect conclude that confessing won't be that bad. And if you reach those 2 conclusions taken together just as a basic cost-benefit analysis, you'll conclude that confessing might be your best way out.
Doctor, when you answer any more questions, can you slow down for at least me? I don't know about the jurors, but just so we all understand your testimony.
My apologies.
No
Yes.
problem, no problem. Doctor, is it the combination of these 2 tactics that contribute to false confessions?
Yes.
And the 2 tactics are,
Confrontation and minimization.
and how do we know that?
So there are a number of ways. First, we've done a great deal of looking at, analyzing cases where we know the confession was false, proven false confessions. And we see the Reed method used in many of these cases. Secondly, there are a few laboratory experiments which reproduce this result. And third, and I think this is crucial, there is a literature on basic principles of decision-making applied to this area. And once we get past our intuition that an innocent person wouldn't confess, and we understand these basic decision-making principles, I've alluded to them, but I'd be happy to repeat them, it actually makes perfect sense that in some circumstances an innocent person would confess.
And why do you say that?
So, as I said, I alluded to this earlier, but I know it's an unusual concept.
Slowly, please, slowly.
Slowly indeed. If you are led to believe that maintaining your innocence is futile, it's not getting you anywhere, the interrogators lead you to believe no one's going to believe you, that is simply not a viable path. And then you are simultaneously led to believe that if you confess, things will be okay. Just think about it. If you actually maintain those 2 beliefs, it makes all the sense in the world that you're going to confess.
But how can someone that's innocent think he's better off by confessing to, let's say, a serious crime, something he didn't do?
So this is not a decision-making, a cost-benefit analysis or decision-making process made under ideal or even normal circumstances. These are made under circumstances deliberately designed to make a suspect feel anxious, stressful, and eventually desperate.
Would like a small 6x8 interrogation room without windows be such a tactic?
Isolating the suspect in a small, windowless interrogation room is very common as part of the Reed technique.
Are academics the only people who maintain that the Reed method contributes to false confessions?
No, a few years ago, a very interesting development. One of the leading interrogation training schools, a competitor of Reed's, Wicklander and Zulawski, who taught a variation of the Reed method, stopped doing so. And they publicly announced that they would no longer teach the Reed method because they realized it was contributing to false confessions.
Overruled.
Doctor, let's turn to the case that you're here for. When I retained you, what did I ask you to do?
To assess the materials, especially the interrogations, the videotaped interrogations of the defendant, and to give you my assessment.
And to make...
Most specifically as to whether problematic tactics had been used.
Thank you. And to make that assessment, what materials did you look at?
Primarily, the videotaped interrogations. I've also read a psychological report.
Did I ask you when I retained you to give me a certain opinion?
Of course not, and if you had, I would have hung up. You asked me to give you an honest assessment.
And what is your assessment?
The officers in the July 20th interrogation of the defendant used a very aggressive version of the Reed technique.
Can you explain that to the jury?
So right at the outset, they told Skylar that with medical scientific certainty, her account where the baby was stillborn was false. That is standard confrontation. And then they advanced any number of minimization themes. They let on that the main purpose of this interrogation was a burial for the baby, a proper burial. They told her that they knew she didn't harm the baby deliberately. They said that she had been alone and in shock. These are all fairly typical minimization themes, but they went beyond that. They made two statements that I found particularly problematic. Lieutenant Fain said to her, "It's not as if we're suddenly going to jump up and judge you and say you're going to jail." And Detective Carter said to her, "You just tell us everything and then we can move on." Both of these comments indicate that the suspect will receive zero punishment if he confesses. Not a light sentence, not a benign treatment, but zero punishment. And that is an extreme and particularly troubling minimization tactic.
And that's it problematic, in your view, for what reason?
Because it can break down an innocent person and lead him or her to confess.
I need to approach again, Judge, I apologize. Professor Hurst, in the interrogation of Skylar, and I believe I'm referring to the second interrogation, July 20th, was there anything in particular about that interrogation that bothered you? And I'm referring to gurgle, the word gurgle. Can you?
Yes.
And what's troubling about that?
It's a subset of a broader phenomenon where there were several examples where Skylar seemed to echo language or information that had been given to her by the interrogators, and that's perhaps the most obvious example. Lieutenant Fain suggested to her more than once, "The baby gurgled," "Did the baby gurgle?" which is somewhat unusual notion, at least to me. And later on, Skylar says, "The baby gurgled." And we find this in many cases of proven false confessions. We see instances where the suspect has basically spat back information or ideas that were supplied by law enforcement.
You said that you're not a psychologist and you do not evaluate defendants to determine their particular susceptibility. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But are you familiar with the literature that tells us about the susceptibility of certain populations or types of people?
Yes, I am.
Can you summarize that for us, please?
There are certain populations.
Go ahead and answer.
Thank you, Your Honor. There are certain populations, young people are among them, people with mental illness are among them, that are particularly susceptible. They're overrepresented in the universe of false confessors. And there are certain individuals who are suggestible. That's what they're called. They can be evaluated for this. They're deemed particularly prone to be broken down
By authority figures?
by authority figures, even if innocent.
You indicated earlier that you read Dr. Bassman's psychological evaluation of the defendant.
Yes, I did.
Was there anything you found significant in that?
I think you might want to rephrase your question, Mr. Richards.
Let me approach for 1 second, Judge.
Mr. Rickers, you may continue.
Your Honor, based on what we discussed at the bench and the court's previous parameters, I'm finished with Professor Hirsch.
Counsel, Cross?
One moment, Your Honor. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
You would agree with me that the read technique that you're talking about, it produces reliable confessions, is that fair?
As well as unreliable. Yeah, what I tell people is the
I'm
problem.
My question was just, you would agree with me that it produces reliable confessions, is that correct?
Some of them, yes.
Okay. And I think you would agree with me, but you never want to look at a suspect's statement by itself. You would want to look at that and look at all of the surrounding circumstances of the offense itself to determine whether you can believe the statements in the that the suspect may be making or not believe them. Is that fair to say?
Yes,
You want to look at all of the circumstances surrounding the offense,
absolutely.
including the suspect's actions leading up to the offense. You would agree with me?
I'd say all the evidence in a case is relevant,
Actions during the time of the offense,
of course.
actions after the offense.
That could be relevant.
You want to take all of that into consideration when you're looking at whether the statements made by a suspect may be true or not true. Is that fair to say?
Yes, it is.
Okay. With respect to your point about minimization, when you're talking about the confrontation and then the minimization, you would agree with me that with respect to minimization, there are times that people actually want to confess or say something that they know that they did wrong, but because they may be afraid of the consequence, that may be prohibiting them from feeling like they can tell the truth. You would agree with that statement, is that correct?
Yes, I hope I could elaborate on an answer I gave you earlier that's also germane to that question.
Mr. Hirsch? Professor Hirsch? If Mr. Knippen asks you a yes or no question, he gets a yes or no answer.
Fair enough. Thank you, Your
All
Honor.
right, go ahead, Mr. Knippen.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. It was that with respect to minimization, there are times that people want to say something that they did, but because of the consequences that they think they may face, they may be reluctant to do that. Is that fair to say?
If I'm limited to yes or no, yes.
And minimization can help put them at ease with that if they can then not focus on the consequences, but just saying what they want to say. Is that fair?
I'm stuck with yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay.
Fair, I think it's a little misleading to leave it there.
Mr. Rickers, can I ask you any questions? Thank you, sir.
Mr. Rickers?
Let me have 1 minute.
You may.
I don't know remember the exact wording, but you wanted to expound upon a yes or no question. Could you tell the jury what that question was and what you want to expound upon, please?
Yes, I think there were a few questions eliciting that minimization can be an effective technique in that it and the Reed method more broadly can produce reliable confessions. And that's certainly true. Not every use of the Reed method produces a false confession, thank goodness. What I tell people is the problem with the Reed method is not that it's ineffective. The problem is that it's too effective. It does break down some guilty defendants, for sure, or suspects, but it also breaks down some innocent suspects.
I have no further questions.
Anything else for this witness?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, Professor. You can step down.
Thank you.
Okay, so Dr. Hirsch is basically telling us that the method that law enforcement uses is so effective that a suspect, even though they didn't commit a crime, they can be hammered and hammered and hammered and hammered into confessing that they did commit a crime. Thus, that suspect confessing to a crime that he or she didn't commit. But is that the case in Brooks? Is that the case in Brooke Skylar Richardson's case? We still have a ways to go. We still have a good ways to go before we get a verdict in the case. Next up to go on the stand is more witness testimony, first coming from Leanna Lyons. Hang on tight, guys.
All right, you may proceed.
Leanna, can you please state your name and spell your last for the record?
My name is Leanna Lyons. It's spelled Leannalyons.
And how old are you, Leanna?
I'm 25.
25 years old. If you scoot a little closer to the microphone, I might pick you up as well. Where'd you go to high school?
I went to Franklin High School.
All right. And did you get further education?
Yes.
Where?
Miami University of Middletown.
What do you do now, currently?
I currently work at VRI. We monitor medical alert buttons. I am a customer service representative.
And where do you live?
I live in Franklin.
Do you remember when you first met Skylar?
Yes.
When was that?
At church when we were younger, I'd probably say early mid 2000s.
Back when you saw, what church?
The Franklin Vineyard.
Did you have a relationship at that point?
No.
Did you guys, to your recollection, ever even talk back then?
No, not really.
Later in life, did you have an occasion to meet Skylar again?
Yes.
When?
When we worked at the Atrium YMCA.
Okay, and the Atrium YMCA, can you explain to the jury what you did there and what the program was?
We worked in a drop-off daycare, meaning while the parents would work out, we would care for their children, ages 6 weeks to 10, 12 years.
And how long, do you remember when you started?
Yes.
When was that?
October of 2014.
And how long were you there?
I was there until February of 2018.
Okay. And you're what, 5 years older than Skylar?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember when Skylar, approximately, when she started working there?
Yes.
When was that?
I would think about 2016
Okay, and do you remember how long she worked there?
until 2017.
So about how long, I know this is easy, but about how long did you work with Skylar?
6, 8 months. It wasn't very long.
Okay. How often, how many days a week were you with her?
About 3 to 4 days a week.
How old was she at the time, do you know?
16 or just barely 17.
And I had in my notes, Skylar started in the summer of 2016, right before her senior year. That'd be about right.
Yes.
And the last date that she worked there would have been, do you remember an incident? Like, was it the interrogation?
Was it July?
So about
July,
a year.
yes.
Does that sound right?
Yes.
So Skylar was 17 or 18, would have made you 22, 23?
Yes.
During work, did you guys have an occasion to speak at all when you guys worked together?
Yes.
How many children would be in child watch at any given time? What would be the range?
The lightest amount of children, maybe none to 1 or 2 children, to about 23.
And how many women did you work with?
There would be 3 of us staffed.
Okay. And by the way, did you and Skylar hang out socially?
No, never outside of work.
Have you ever hung out with Skylar outside of work?
No.
And Skylar hasn't worked there for over 2 years?
Correct.
Okay. When you worked with her for those 10 to 12 months and saw her 3 to 4 times a week, did you have an ability to form an opinion regarding how she interacted with children?
Yes.
And did you have an ability to form an opinion as to how she interacted with human beings, other coworkers?
Yes.
And parents?
Yes.
What, if you could describe Skylar's character for us, from what you saw with her interacting with children, what would that be?
Very kind, very sweet, very naive.
Why do you say naive?
There were things that I would talk about with the other coworkers, and maybe I'd go back and re-explain it, or naive just as she has not been exposed to the things that I have.
Young-ish?
Yes.
Was there ever an occasion where you wanted to kill an animal, an insect? And can you tell us that story?
I wouldn't kill it. There was a bug in our front window. I called up to the front desk. They would not go back and kill it. They told me that I had to. So I decided to stay away from it. When Skylar got to work that day, I asked her if she would kill it, and she just scooped it up in a little cup and took it outside and released it.
How many you worked there for 4 to 5 years, right? And about how many teenagers or women did you work with?
Probably about 10.
How did Skylar stack up among the ladies that you worked with in terms of her ability to interact and connect with children?
Really well. I'd put her up there with one of the better teachers that we have.
Were there any children that would make any expressions to you that would indicate that they wanted Skylar and that was it when they got there?
Yes.
And how so?
When this child was younger, he would always sleep. She would hold him while he fell asleep, and he got attached to her that way.
Was there a child that would cry if Skylar wasn't working?
Yes.
And do you remember how old that child was?
I believe he was 3.
Do you remember Skylar stopped working in July when she was charged in this case. Do you remember in February, March, or April, or May any signs of pregnancy that you saw when she worked with you?
No.
What did she wear to work? Was it the same for everyone?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as Defendant's Exhibit 0031. Is this the t-shirt that was essentially issued, right, for you ladies?
Yes.
And when was this taken, if you know?
Easter.
How do you know?
The rabbit.
Sorry. You were not in this picture.
I was not.
Okay. Is this what most of the ladies wore, and Skylar would wear workout leggings and a t-shirt? Did she ever change that workout leggings and t-shirt while you worked with her?
Maybe a different color t-shirt, but we were told to wear purple, but those shirts don't hold up very well, so we would always get different colored ones as replacements.
You know what Skylar's charged with in this case?
Yes.
Is she capable of hurting another human being?
No.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Knippen, Mrs. Kraft, you may inquire.
Good afternoon, ma'am. So through her work at Atrium, is that right? Atrium Y?
Mm-hmm.
Skylar has been around all kinds of different babies, is that correct?
Yes.
Babies as young as 6 weeks old. I'm assuming some of those are big babies, some of those are medium-sized babies, and some of those are small babies. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
So she has been around all types of babies and knows the different sizes of babies. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. When you were working with her, you didn't know that she was pregnant, is that right?
That is correct.
And you didn't know that she was actively concealing her pregnancy, did you?
No, I did not.
And you didn't know that at the time that she had given birth in the middle of the night, alone, and then taken that baby and buried it out in the backyard, did you?
I had no clue, nothing had happened.
When you learned of that, when you saw, I'm assuming you probably saw it on the news, is that fair to say?
When she was first arrested, yes.
Were you shocked to know that?
Yes.
Why were you shocked?
Because the Skylar that I know would not do that.
So would you have even been able to fathom or consider that she would have had the ability to conceal a baby, deliver it in the middle of the night, and then bury that baby in the backyard? Would you even be able to fathom that from Skylar?
Never.
So is it fair to say that we don't always know what people are capable of?
The Skylar I know would not do that, and I firmly believe that. So,
And I understand that. And I understand that you're saying she would never hurt another human being. But the Skylar you know, can you imagine her, forget whether she murdered her baby or not, can you imagine her giving birth alone in the middle of the night and taking this lifeless body out to the backyard and burying it? Can you imagine that from the Skylar that you know?
I could not imagine that from anyone, no.
Thank you.
Anything else for this witness? Thank you, ma'am. You can step down. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we are going to call it a night for the evening. Remember the things that you're free to go, ma'am. Remember the things that I have previously told you. All of those things still apply. Do not begin thinking about how this case should be decided. Do not begin discussing the case amongst yourselves. Do not let any of the people at home discuss the case with you or in your presence. Do not read any media accounts about this. No internet research on your own. Don't go to Professor Hirsch's website. Just take what we give you as the evidence and don't do any homework on this on your own. We will plan on starting tomorrow morning, again at 9 o'clock. We seem to be settled into a pretty good pattern. We get here by 8:45 and we start at 9 o'clock. Mr. Mullins, you can take the jury out.
Okay, it's the very next day. Testimony is going to continue for the defense's case, and now we are going to hear from Chris Curry.
We are on the record outside the presence of the jury. We probably should take this opportunity to talk about some objections that were made during the testimony this afternoon. Ms. Kraft, you wanted to make a record about your objections concerning playing the tape of Dr. Andrew to Dr. White.
Yes, Your Honor. I think that there was testimony that he considered everything that he thought was relevant to the case. I had questioned him on whether or not he had been provided with those and asked if the information that was in there would have been something he would have liked to have known. He indicated yes. I asked at that time if I could play those so that he could determine whether or not the information contained within those would have changed his opinion in any way.
Mr. Rickers, I think that you wanted to place on the record some of the questions that you wanted to ask Professor Hirsch that I would not permit and proffer those answers.
Judge, I'm satisfied with what you allowed in, and I'm not going to make any further objection.
Okay, so no proffer?
No proffer.
All right, anything else we need to do today?
Judge, there's a state fire marshal report that the state gave us as part of the discovery. It's base stamp 272. They did not call Detective Carter to the stand, and Lieutenant Fain testified that he was aware of it, but I don't think I asked him if it was a fair and accurate depiction and presented it. The state is refusing to agree to the authenticity, so we might have to call the state fire marshal down here and have them come when they're available to authenticate what they gave us in discovery, because we want the jury to have it.
Okay. Any reason not to talk about some housekeeping issues now that we're finished?
Housekeeping in terms of,
Scheduling for tomorrow?
oh, no, that's fine.
Okay, all right, let's take about a 5-minute break, and if you need longer than that, that's fine. Why don't we reconvene here, and you can make your way through here. The jury's gone by now, so you can make your way back to me. I know Mr. Mullins is doing his cleanup, so as long as you're together, you can make your way back to me. All right, we'll see everybody back here tomorrow at 8:45 with the idea of starting at 9 o'clock. We're in recess. Case of the State of Ohio versus Brooke, Skylar, Richardson, case number 2017 CR 33292. Present before the court is Ms. Richardson, right? Represented by Mr. Rickers and Mr. Rickers. We have Mr. Knippen from the prosecutor's office, Ms. Kraft, also from the prosecutor's office. We are here today for a continuation of our jury trial. Anything preliminary to come to the court's attention? Mr. Knippen on behalf of the state?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Rickers on behalf of the defense?
No, Judge.
Are we ready for our jury?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Mullins, go get our jury. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Is everybody able to follow my instructions and admonitions over our break last night and into this morning? Yes, sir. I apologize that we are a little bit late getting started this morning. We didn't want to do anything to interfere with our 9/11 memorial that is going on across the parking lot. Mr. Rickers, you may call your next witness.
Thank you, Judge. Chris Curry.
All right. This witness is somebody who has indicated that they do not wish to be videotaped or photographed.
Raise your right hand. You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you will give in these proceedings will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I swear.
You may proceed.
Mr. Curry, can you please state your full name for the record and spell your last?
Christopher David Curry, C-U-R-R-Y.
And how old are you?
I am 50 years old.
Do you have family?
I have 2 children, a son and a daughter.
And where do you work?
I am a senior English teacher at Carlisle High School.
How long have you been a teacher?
24 years.
And how long have you taught at Carlisle?
The last 21 years.
What do you teach? You said senior English teacher?
I do. I teach standard senior English, which most kids teach or take, and then I teach a dual credit college class, which would be English 101 and 102.
Can you tell us when you first met Skylar?
I did. It was in August of 2016 on the first day of school.
What year would she have been at that time?
She would have been entering her senior year.
Okay. And after that point, August 2016, going into her senior year, how often would you see her over the course of the next 9 months?
I would have seen her every day. She had good attendance. The college class, I try to model after a regular college class. So we met in the classroom Monday, Wednesday, Friday for classwork. And then on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we would go to the writing lab, where students would work on their essays and then conference with me on their writing. So I would have seen and spoke to her every day.
Did you, every school day?
Every school day.
Your Honor, I'm hearing a little feedback. I don't know if the jury hears that or not. Did you have occasion to work one-on-one with Skylar during her senior year of high school?
Yeah, quite often on those Tuesdays and Thursdays when we were in the writing lab, students have the opportunity to come and talk to me about their writing. And of all the students that I had that year, I met more with Skylar than any other.
Okay. Is there anything, you're aware of the charges in this case, correct?
I am.
Is any of the essays that Skylar wrote, anything pertinent stand out to you?
Well, we wrote a lot that year. 7 full essays, at least 30 or more weekly journals. So she wrote on a variety of topics, but the only one that stood out and still does to this day, is that she wrote an essay on her struggles with her eating disorders that she had had prior to that. And she and I met quite often about that essay.
Did you talk to Skylar when you met one-on-one? Was that Tuesday, Thursdays?
Yes.
I mean, you were sitting very close to her during that school year, correct?
Yeah, at the same table.
Did you talk to her about more than just the schoolwork on some occasions?
I did, especially about that essay. Issues that I had with it is I wanted her to move beyond just the plot of what happened and dig a little bit more into maybe some of the emotional impact or motivation. I always want to push them that their writing is a good reflection of themselves. So we talked quite a bit about that issue in particular and the way she felt about it.
Sorry.
Maybe if you could just scoot back from the
Am I
microphone
too
just a
close?
little bit.
Okay, I'll use my teacher voice.
I think we're okay.
Okay.
Mr. Rickers, you might do the same. Just
Step back a little.
back a little bit, because we're hearing you okay, but I don't know where the feedback's coming from.
Okay, thank you, Judge. Mr. Curry, did you and Skylar speak at all about things that were not school-related, like family?
Yeah, we did. We did. To help engage with my students, I will speak and talk about my kids quite a bit, especially my youngest daughter. She is a person with autism, so she's a bit of a character, and I used to like to tell stories about her. And Skylar seemed to take a particular interest in her and her life. If my daughter had a choir concert on Tuesday, first thing when I saw Skylar on Wednesday, she would want to know, how did it go? Did I have any pictures? If we saw a much anticipated movie over the weekend, she would want to know, did my daughter enjoy it? Did she get her popcorn? So she and I talked about, particularly my daughter, quite a bit.
Being a teacher at Carlisle High School and being a teacher for 24 years, how many students do you think you've taught over the years?
At least 3,000 and probably more than that, easily.
And you've been with Carlisle for more than 20 years.
I have.
Do teachers meet and discuss other students at times?
Yeah, quite a bit, yeah.
During your time as a teacher at Carlisle and knowing Skylar, have you had the ability to form an opinion regarding her reputation among all the other teachers at Carlisle?
I have, yes. She was known to be a hard worker and someone that always followed the rules and did what she was told in class. She was one of those students that you wish you had 25 more of them in class, and she had that reputation amongst everybody.
Could you gauge how much respect she had for authority figures like teachers or principals?
Yeah, I mean, in general, I mean, that was the reputation she had. Specifically, I knew that for a fact just with my relationship with her. If I made a critique or a comment on an essay that she had turned in, I knew for a fact that that was the last time that mistake was going to be made for Skylar. I think that she didn't want to disappoint me and was always wanting to be a good writer and wanted, in my opinion, mattered to her.
How was she, if you know, to other students, her peers?
Yeah, obviously she was well liked and popular, but I know for a fact sometimes we'd eat lunch and I'd have to go through the student cafeteria, and I noticed on many occasions that she would sit at a table with just one other student. He was also a child on the autism spectrum and many times would be forced to eat alone. They're ghosts in our school, and I noticed on numerous occasions that Skylar would sit down and eat with him so that he didn't have to eat by himself. And you know, she could have eaten at any table she wanted to, but always would sit and eat with him so he didn't eat by himself.
And you personally saw that on occasion?
On numerous occasions, yeah, because, you know, I mean, I'm always looking to see who kids are eating with. Lunchroom, cafeteria, that's a viper pit in school, right? And that's where kids struggle to find their place. My daughter struggles with who to eat with at lunch. So when you notice this certain student sitting next to Skylar, I mean, the two of them don't go together, but they do in that occasion. And it was well known that she would put money on his account when he didn't have any money left to eat. And it was well known in our school that she had done that a number of times.
You said that you met with Skylar once or twice a week?
Yeah,
Had her in class 5 days a week?
yes.
Did you have any inclination, any sign that she was pregnant?
I did not at all.
Have you seen a full-term pregnant woman?
I have twice, up close.
And Skylar at no point looked full-term.
Not at all.
You've had over 3,000 students. What makes you remember Skylar more than 2 years later? Why does she stand out to you?
Well, most of the students I've had were all really good kids, but they have a tendency to blend together in my memory. It's the nature of the business. You have so many students. You have some that might excel in academics, just be strong students. And then sometimes you have students that are just genuinely good people that care about others. But rarely do you have some that fall into both categories. I can count on one hand the number of students that I had that fell in both those categories, and I remember all of them, and Skylar Richardson was one of them.
Thank you.
One more. No questions. Thank you, sir. You can step down.
Thank you.
Next witness.
Ashley Brown, Your Honor.
And Ms. Brown is also.
Now that I got myself on focus here, now we're going to get a little bit more character testimony from Ashley Brown.
Also one of our individuals who has requested not to be filmed or photographed. You may proceed.
Ashley, please state your full name and spell the last for the record.
Ashley Brown, ASH, or LEYBROWN.
Are you nervous?
Yeah.
When did you graduate from Carlisle?
2017.
Your same year as Skylar.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about you now? Where do you work?
I have 3 jobs. In the mornings, I go and take care of a little special needs 11-year-old. I get her ready and put her on the bus. My second job is I work at, it's called Lovely's Farm Market. It's a little mom and pop shop on the weekends. And then I'm also a softball instructor, so I work with little kids doing hitting and pitching drill.
Is that because you had experience playing softball?
Yes, I've been playing softball since 10 years. I just retired this year, and I went and played in college too.
When did you first move to Carlisle?
4th grade.
And when did you first meet Skylar?
Around 5th grade.
You two became friends.
Yes, we did.
And throughout school, from 5th grade, how old were you in 5th grade?
10, maybe 11. I don't know.
Okay. Did you see Skylar almost daily for
Yes.
really the rest of your life?
Yeah.
How old are you?
20.
Seen her less the past couple years though.
Yeah, I mean, we still hang out quite a bit on a regular basis, but we're not in school together, so it's not every day.
Okay. Did you have the ability to see Skylar interact with other students in your school?
Yes, I did.
How did she treat other students?
She was always kind to everyone, even the kids that didn't hang out, like in our group per se. I would always see, like, they'd come up to Skylar in class and talk, and you could see, like, they had a relationship that, at the time, I didn't even realize she was friends with kids that we didn't all hang out with. Always included everyone.
Did you ever go to, like, her brother's baseball games or sporting events where she was in the attendance and not cheering?
Yes, I did.
Can you tell us about what she would do there?
So obviously watching the game, but there's a lot of time little kids of the brothers playing baseball. And there's one little girl in particular that took a real interest to Skylar, and Skylar took an interest to her. And Skylar would always bring like coloring books or her makeup or try to do stuff that they could do at the game, whether it be them playing to the side or her dressing her up or coloring, or even if they were just actually watching the game, the little girl would sit on Skylar's lap the whole time, and as soon as Skylar would walk up, she'd run to her, and she was attached at her hip the whole time till they left.
Did you two see each other, you and Skylar, outside of school back when you were younger, after you turned 16?
Yeah, we'd hang out on weekends and
Go out to eat?
yeah, go out to eat.
How'd Skylar treat waiters and waitresses?
Very well, honestly. She, like, after we would eat, and you know, you have all your plates and napkins and silverware, she would like gather all of our stuff, like put all the plates together and get all of our dirty napkins, which is something I never even thought to do, and basically wipe off the table, clean the table, so the waitress would never have to do anything. She wouldn't want to cause the waitress to have to do any more work. Or I've even seen her like where they completely get her food order wrong, and she'd be like, oh my gosh, like, should I tell them? Like, I don't want to bother them. And even if she would tell them, she'd be like, I'm so sorry, I hate to bother you, but you know, like, I didn't order this, or this wasn't rice. But again, I'm so sorry, like, it's no big deal and stuff. So she was always very kind to them.
Skylar, if you could scoot back in your chair just a little bit, I think we're getting a little feedback that might help. Okay. That's good, thank you.
How would you describe her character for confrontation? Was she confrontational?
No.
Were there situations where you and your friends would have to stick up for her if people were mean to her?
Yeah, there's a couple times in particular where girls were bullying her pretty bad, and she just wouldn't stand up for herself at all. And and a couple times me and another girl in particular would have to kind of take up for her because she didn't want any problems with anyone and wouldn't stick up for herself.
People pleaser?
Yes,
Prefer to
very much.
tell people what they want to hear as opposed to
Objection.
Overruled. Go ahead and answer if you can.
If there's one word to describe Skylar, it's a people pleaser. She never wants to cause anyone any problem. She always wants to make everyone around her happy, even if that means people she doesn't necessarily like. She won't go out of her way to even stick up to herself for herself.
You're aware she's accused of murdering her baby, are you not?
Yes.
Do you have an opinion, knowing her all these years, if she has the ability to hurt another human being?
No, not at all. I've never even seen Skylar be mean to another human being. She would never hurt another human being, especially her baby.
Thank you.
Ms. Kraft, you may inquire.
1 second, Your Honor.
Good morning.
So I know we now know, and I'm sure that you know as well, that Skylar, whether you believe that she could have hurt her baby or not, that she did in fact conceal a pregnancy, gave birth in the middle of the night, and then buried her baby in the backyard. Are you aware of that?
Yes.
Would you have thought she was ever capable of that until you heard that it happened?
Can you rephrase?
Sure. Until you actually heard what happened in this case, as the facts came out. And again, I'm not talking to you about whether she murdered her baby.
Okay.
Just the fact that she would have gotten pregnant, concealed it from her parents, delivered alone in the middle of the night, and then instead of, going to the hospital or calling anyone, taking that baby out to the backyard, digging a pile into the ground, or in the ground, and then placing her baby in there. Prior to knowing that about her, would you have ever thought that she was capable of that?
I mean, when everything came out, I was shocked. Yes, I was shocked. But I don't know.
Okay.
I don't
No
know,
further
sorry.
questions, Your Honor.
Anything else for this witness?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Brown, you can step down.